Hi, this is Joe Bolen, and today we're going to look at designing a program. A lot of times, those who are first learning how to create a program are totally lost. They don't know how to go about it. And to be frank, sometimes it takes even the experienced programmer the tools that he's learned over the years to handle creating a program or modifying a program. So today we're going to take a look at actually the process of designing a program, and then we'll go into the first stages of that design. So let's take a look at what we're going to be doing. We're going to be creating a very simple calculator, and this is strictly for illustration purposes. It's not a very complex program, but it'll give you the ideas behind how to do more difficult types of projects on that. So first of all, we've got to have some kind of idea of what we want to have. And so I had an idea. I wanted to make a little simple calculator for this series to illustrate some of the basic controls and, in fact, to create this lesson. So what I did was I just went and got my plain piece of paper out of the printer and got some pens, and I started to sketch my form for my very simple calculator. And that is the process that you really have to begin with. You have to look at what kinds of input that I'm going to have for my project, what kinds of output am I going to have for my project. You're going to have to then determine where do I get those inputs and outputs from, and what do I have to do in the middle in that process period to take something from input, manipulate it, and then output it. So those are the kinds of things that analysis person has to do. And many times we're called to be not only the programmer, but the programmer analyst. Or as we evolve, we'll probably leave programming behind and become an analyst, giving our specifications to the programmer. So let me show you a little bit about the process of creating that simple calculator. I have on the screen my little sketch that I created. It's just a simple form, and I put in the title, the caption area of the menu. I then put in the labels that I wanted, and in case this one is actually a label for the result, since it's only for output and nothing will be going into it. The other two up here are text boxes for input. And then I had a series of buttons that I created in my design ideas that I wanted, and those are going to have later on some events attached to it. So this is the first stage, is to create a simple form of what the input type of interface is going to be. In this case, it's the user interface. We also want to look at the results. Maybe I'm creating a report as well, and there I would want to have designed the layout of my report, and I might just use something like a word processor to create a real rough draft of that kind of report to give to the programmer an idea what needs to be done to create the report. The next thing I would do is go in and look at the controls themselves, and depending upon how experienced the programmer is, I might have to lay out the controls that are being used. So here we see in this graph the form I'm going to be using. I'll be calling it main form. Its text or caption is going to be a very simple calculator. I'm going to use the Microsoft recommended font size, the Seago UI, regular style, 9-point. And I'm going to make this one a sort of a square-looking window form of 310 by 310. I'm going to have the start position to center screen. And then looking at the labels, you'll see that I have a first number label, and I'm using the text with the ampersand in front of the F, and that makes it a quick access key so that I can use the Alt key and the F to quickly jump to the location. Now, just to remind you, or if you don't know, a label cannot receive focus, but what will happen is by going first to the label, it'll jump then to the text box beside the label. And so by having the ampersand in front of this as a quick access, it'll jump to the text box that follows this one. Then I did that also for the second number label on that. So this defines the text box that will appear. And then we have other labels in here on that we have set and designed. Now, one of the ones to note is the label called result value label. This one's a little bit unique from just a plain label. This will be where our results are going to be put in. And I want the text blank for that to start out, because we're going to fill that after we do the calculations. We're going to turn off auto size and change the border style to fixed 3D. We're going to make the size of it, though, the same size of our text box, and we're going to have the text alignment middle right, because it's a numeric value being held into that position. Then we have our text boxes. Once again, they're very simple layouts on that. And then we have our different buttons that we have that we're going to be set up. In our case, all the buttons are going to be the same size, 50 by 50 on that. And we're going to use 18 point, though, for the font size, so it's somewhat large. And you'll see the different symbols that will go into the text of the button and the button names that are there. So this creates our layout that I would hand on to a programmer to give them the information they need to code the code. Then I would create perhaps some pseudocode. Now this could be a function of analysis or a programmer to do. And here we see the events. I have an add button click event, and I'm saying add first number to second number and show the sum is what that event's going to do. And then I create a couple of steps that will be in there. I'm going to declare my variables. I'm going to convert text or the string value of the input that I have to numeric data types. And then I'm going to process and calculate the sum. And then convert that numeric data types back into a string for output into my result label. And you'll see each of the different buttons have their own pseudocode events. Now, pseudocode is nothing more than just an English-like writing of what we want to have happen. It doesn't have to be very detailed, but it gives you indication of what kinds of processes have to take place at each stage through the different events that we'll have on that. And then if I want to get a little bit more complex, we can create what's called an ACE chart. In an ACE chart, we have the action. In this case, it's also like the pseudocode, the control that we're working with, and the event of that control that is going to be taking place. So here we see the add button is going to have a button click event associated with it, and it's going to process some a first number and second number variables and a sum variable on that. So I'll have to declare those data types, and then I'm going to do some processing, and then I'm going to convert that output, and that output will go to the result value label text property. So we see that each of the different controls, the add button, the subtract button, multiply button, divide button, and clear button, have events. In this case, they're all going to have the button click event, which is the default event for the buttons. And in there, we're going to initiate some action and process our information to have the results that we want to have for our simple calculator. So all of these, from the very beginning of a simple sketch, getting an idea of what we're going to need for input and for output, doing some quick labeling of maybe the controls we're going to be naming on that. Also then going into maybe more detail and coming up with the actual properties of those controls and labeling those, maybe more so for a novice programmer might need this kind of information since they wouldn't necessarily know the standards of a programming shop. And then we might have some simple pseudocode to help the person know what needs to be done. And then we might create a special ACE chart giving the action that's going to happen for the events that we're going to have for those controls. Those are all kinds of things that are needed to get started. The one thing that's most difficult, though, is, okay, I've got my simple design, and I've got pseudocode that I want to create. But how do I create this pseudocode? Well, first of all, you've got to sort of divide and conquer. Look at the things that we need to do within that event that we're having. In this case, it's the add button click event. Well, I'm going to have to declare some variables to use during that procedure. Then I'm going to take information from the user interface and convert it to numeric data types so I can do some processing. And then I have to do that processing. In case for the add button, I'm going to be calculating the sum. And then once I have that sum calculated, I'm going to have to convert it back into a string value for the label. In this case, the result value label text property will get the value of the sum. So we need to basically take everything and break it down into small steps. So we use the divide and conquer approach. Don't bite off too much up front. Think about breaking it down to small little parts that you have to do. And the pseudocode is an excellent way to do that kind of thing. Well, let's go into Visual Basic and begin the process of actually creating our simple calculator. So let's go into Visual Basic. I'm going to go to New Project. And this one is going to be a Windows desktop project, a form application, and I'm going to call this one a very simple calculator. Very simple calculator. Okay. So with that being the start, we'll hit OK. And we have our form on here. Now, based off the information I created and the specs that I would provide to the programmer, I'm going to start out and rename the form to main form, since that was the name. So I'm going to Solution Explorer, right-clicking and hitting rename. And I'm going to call it main form. Mainform.vb. Now that I have mainform VB set, one of the things I'm going to do first of all is give it the caption title area, and this is very simple calculator for my title. I also want to change the size, and I'll do that in a minute, but first of all I want to set my font size to the recommended user interface that Microsoft has. And here I've clicked on font, gone to the ellipsis, and I'm in there, and I'm going to click on Seago UI regular 9-point font size. And that'll change my shape of my form a little bit after I've done that to accommodate the changes. Then I'm going to come down to size. In this case, I'm going to set the size on this 310 by 310 to start out and see if that's going to be right on our settings. And at this point, I also want to have it start up, the startup location. Instead of Windows default, I want to make it center screen. And then I'm going to go back and check to make certain I have everything set. The name is main form. I have the Seago UI 9-point font for the default font for this one. And I've also set my size location 310 by 310. We may have to adjust that as we add things to the screen. I'm going to start out center screen. My text is very simple calculator. At this point, I'm pretty good with things. I'm going to hit a save all and keep that in from memory to disk at this point. So I'm going to save it in the 2013 projects. You can save it anywhere you want, but I'm going to create also a solution folder as well by the very same name. Okay. Apparently I have one in the same spot, so I'll change that location. And now we're okay. Okay, we've got it saved and we're ready to begin the process. Now, one of the things we can do is document our code, and we'll get into that later, but let's get our screen ready to go. And I need to get the toolbox over, and I'm going to pin the toolbox so I can work with the common controls for this one. So we start out and we have our first part that we're going to put in is a label, and I'll just sort of eyeball it with the location there. And that label is going to be called, we'll rename it from label 1 to first number label. So we've given it a new name, first number label, and we're going to change its text property to say, in this case, ampersand for the quick access key, FIRST number colon. Okay, we've got that set, and at that point I'm going to click back. Now to speed up the process, I'm going to create one almost like it, so I'm going to highlight this one. I'm going to do a Control-C to copy it, a Control-V to paste another one onto the form, relocate it, and I'll come up and name this one second number label. I'll change its text as well. In this case, it'll be called second number, ending in a colon. Okay. Then I'm going to have another one, so I'm going to copy this again and do a Control-C, then a Control-V, and I'm going to put this one about here. This one will be my result, so I'm going to call this result label. And I'm going to have the text say result. Now I do not need the quick access for this one because this is an output only field. Okay, I've got that set. Now let's create the text boxes that we need. So I'm going to come over and drag a text box over and align it somewhat about there and release it. I'm going to make it a little bit wider for this one. And this one will be called, instead of text box 1, which is the default, we're going to call this first number text box. And you'll see that I'm putting the suffix of the control type. I'm going to highlight this again, do a Control-C and then a Control-V, drag it up, line it up, and rename this one to second number text box. Okay. And now I'm going to add another label, and I'll just drag this one over here for an example. This will be where we put the results in here, and this is going to be called the result value label. It's output only, and I'm going to change it a little bit. Auto size is going to be false on that, and I'm going to change the border style to fixed 3D, and I'm going to come down and make certain that I have nothing in the label area of that. And then I'm going to come over to the screen and do a little dragging, and basically I'm lining it up to about the same thing as the other text boxes that are above it. And what I'm going to do is take a look first of all at the text box above it and look at the size. It's 157 by 23, and the one below it is also 157 by 23. So I'm going to make this label the same size, 157 by 23. I'm off just a few pixels on the size, so it's now exactly the same size. Now for all these, I'm going to highlight the two text boxes and set the property of those two text boxes. I held down the Control key when I clicked on both those, and I came down and I want to set this, since we're going to put in the text boxes numbers, instead of having the text align to the left, I'm going to change the text align to the right. And the label I'm going to click on as well and change its text alignment It has a little bit different layout for text alignment, and we're going to change that to middle right on that one. So I've got the property set for these on that. Now I'm going to just confirm that my labels line up correctly, and I'm doing a quick set of those, and you can see how the grid shows me the information I need, and they're all set. Now we need to put in our buttons that we want for this project. So I'm going to click on a button, drag it over here, and about here's where I'm going to release it and get it somewhat set. Now this one, we're going to change its size and its font. So first thing I'm going to do is call this particular one the Add button, to give it a name. Okay, I've got the name Add button, and we're going to change the font size in this case. I'm going to click on the ellipsis, change the font size to 18 point for this one. So it's bigger. And I'm going to change its size from 7523 to make it square, and we're going to make it 50 by 50. And the text in there for this one, since it's add, I'm going to put the plus sign in there for the add. And so I've got my button all set on that. We've got a name for it. We called it the Add button. We changed the font size to 18 point on that, and we changed the size of the button to 50 by 50, and we gave it a text information. In this case, it was the plus sign for addition. Okay, with that done, I'm going to make a number of buttons just like this. So I'm going to highlight this one by clicking on it, doing a Control-C and then a Control-V, and right there's where I'm going to put this one. This will be the Subtract button. So I'll come up and name this one Subtract button. And I'll come down and change the text. And since I copied everything, I don't have to change anything else, which speeds up the process on that. So I've got that set. Now, to save even more time, I'm going to drag over the two of those where I've got them both set, and I'm going to do a Control-C. Then I'm going to do a Control-V. I have another set. I'll drag them down underneath like that. Release. Highlight the one here and change it. Coming up, I'll call this one the multiply button. Multiply button, and here's where we use the asterisk for this one. So I come down to the text and change that to the asterisk, which is the symbol above the 8. And then I'm going to come over here to the next one, and I'm going to change its name to the divide button. And I'm going to change its symbol for this one to be the / for divide. Okay, I've got my 4 buttons. I need one more button, so I'm going to just click on this one real quickly, do a copy, and then with a Control-C, then a Control-V to paste a clone just like it, and put it in there about the same width apart. And this one is going to be the clear button. So I'm going to name this clear button. And then I'm going to come down and change the text on this one from being the negative sign to a capital C for clear. Okay. Now I sort of like what I've got. I'm going to drag over all the buttons and capture them all. And then I'm going to drag them and do a little centering and make it more like this. And then I'm going to release. Okay, I've got everything set on my form. I'm going to do a save all. And one other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to the format on the menu and come down and lock the controls. That way I won't bump them and change their locations by locking it. and you'll see a little padlock appear on my control up here in the corner. This will keep me from accidentally knocking those. I'll have to unlock it before I can change it. Now I can't come over to the properties area and set some different things, but basically I've locked this form in place. So at this point in time, we've gone from our little simple design that we had on that and come over and created our form to represent that. We've labeled everything, giving it names for each control that we have, so they're all set, and we can see those in the component drop-down area in our properties. We'll see all the different controls that we've added to our form, as well as our form itself. And so at this point, I'm going to do a save all, and I think we're going to in this particular part of the lesson, we've gone into designing, and you saw how I created the form. But first of all, I had to have an idea, and so you have to have a clear sense of what you're going to be creating. You need to sketch out the form that you're going to be using, or the kinds of inputs you're going to be needing, the results, the outputs you're going to be having. You'll also need to sketch out, especially if you're designing a report, you'll want to lay out a report. And once again, simple thing to use is just use your word processor to lay that out, so you get an idea of the layout of your report. Then you go in and define each of the controls, so you know what controls you're going to be having on your user interface. You're going to hand that on to the programmer so they know what to do. You're going to create maybe some pseudocode, which is just English or your native language, simply describing the steps or processes. And remember, use the divide and conquer approach. Break it down into small little steps on that. When you get up in the morning, you don't just get up and go to school or to work. You go through a series of processes and think about all the things you have to do if you consciously sit down and break them down. For the time you hear your alarm clock going off, you reach over and turn it off. Then you maybe make your bed. Then you go get cleaned up. You brush your teeth. All the different little stages you have to do to get ready to go to school or work. Those kinds of things a programmer has to break down into little steps. There's no one big key to hit to make all those steps appear magically. As you saw, I laid out just 5 different buttons on my form. And those 5 different buttons are going to have events associated with it after I go into it later on, and each of those are going to have steps that will have to be done, and I'll have to divide and conquer and know what I'm going to be doing to break each of those steps down. So this gives you an idea what a programmer analyst or an analyst has to do to get the project ready for a programmer. The stages of breaking things down into small steps is essential. Don't jump real quickly into Visual Studio and try to do things. Have a clear idea of where you're beginning and where you want to go. And if you know where you're starting and where you're going to end up, then getting there is going to be a lot faster, easier, and less time consumed. And ultimately, when you get hired as a programmer, you want to be productive, and that means you get your job done quickly, accurately, and on time and on budget to the people that you're trying to provide a service for. And those are the kinds of things you'll need to develop over the years. It's no simple task. You learn at school little things at a time. First you learned how to write your name, then you learned a little bit more about reading, then you learned more about writing short paragraphs, and then stories. Same is true with programming. You need to start out with small steps, develop those steps, and grow. You'll learn more about the controls that you'll be putting on your user interface. You'll be knowing more about the kinds of processes you need to do behind the scenes for those different events. And that all takes time to learn. But break them down into small steps to conquer them on that. So get your hands dirty in the code. Create this form and get it going. We're going to come back and actually put the code behind it. And I'll show you about how we do that using our pseudocode that we just had. So take care and get your hands dirty in the code.